Some people like to propose feel-good adages like, you can't fight fire with fire. But the fact of the matter is that you can, and it absolutely works. A forest fire is extinguished by lighting up a much bigger fire in a controlled manner that eventually starves the original fire of oxygen. Then, also in a controlled manner, the bigger fire is extinguished. Thousands upon thousands of lives and billions in property assets have been saved through this technique. The same is true in the realm of politics. Upping the ante against the agents of totalitarianism not only works, but it's oftentimes the only way to effectively deal with them and make real progress on the freedom front. Lately, there have been a few contentious cases of freedom of association. The forces of the non-left should absolutely fight them tooth and nail, because only a mutually assured destruction will make any progress possible. Let's explore. Hello everyone, and welcome to the Freedom Alternative. Alright, so as I'm sure everyone already knows, or at least implicitly assumes, I am a free speech absolutist in the constitutional sense. That is to say, I believe the government should not be allowed to censor or punish anyone in any way, shape or form for something that they said or wrote. That means I'm fine with all sorts of nasty speech, and I believe that the solution to that is more speech and not censorship. With that said, the only legitimate boundary that I recognize is private property. If Google decides to eject me from their property, that's their right, just as it's my right to make sure I take Google down with me. Similarly, if I decide to delete a comment or disable the comment section altogether, that's my right, just like it's the right of any viewer to criticize me and mock me for doing so. What I haven't made clear enough, although explained it at length and used as an example in my December 31st, 2015 video called Is Discrimination Really That Bad?, is that I'm also a freedom of association absolutist. That means I believe the government has no business telling me whom I should or shouldn't include in my private association, regardless of whether that association is a business, NGO, club, bar, whatever. That's why I rarely speak up against safe spaces, black-only spaces, and all the rest. Unless they do it on public shekels, in which case the state has an obligation to break that thing up because we all pay for it and therefore we're entitled to it. But as long as they're doing it on private property, I'm very fine with that. With that said, not all jurisdictions are in that state. Some are, but many aren't. So the question is, how do we get there? Because it is blatantly obvious that way too many jurisdictions have a whole set of de facto double standards. Women-only gyms, okay. Men-only barbers, not okay. Negro-only clubs, okay. White-only clubs, not okay. But they should all be okay. And if you don't like it, boycott it, compete with it, shame it, openly criticize it. There are options, but the options of bringing the violence of the state to the table should cease to exist. So how do we get there? Well, one option is to fight back. Let me give two recent examples. Example number one, reported by Salon, that purulent rag that can't even pay its rent. With the headline, "Dang, looks like those women-only Wonder Woman screenings were illegal." This coming after back in May they reported the controversy with the headline, "Man babies cry digital tears over women-only Wonder Woman screening." So a few guys filed a complaint with the city and the city agreed that they have a point. Salon writes, quote, "As it turns out, the complaints have at least some legal merit. Austin City equality codes ban any public accommodation, such as a movie theater, from limiting their services for individuals based on factors including race, color, sex, sexual orientation, and gender identification. It's a situation even Wonder Woman couldn't fix." In an attempt to appease those who complain, the chain is offering to send these men DVDs of Wonder Woman and will update their discrimination policies in addition to sending a letter out to their staff. If the men do not accept these terms, the city may launch an investigation into the reports and the theater could face possible repercussions, close quote. Now I hope and pray that those dudes do not, I repeat, do not accept these terms. And I suspect they won't. If they were smart enough to pull this off, they're also smart enough to know that the issue is not the Wonder Woman movie per se, which by the way is crap. But seriously, the issue is not the issue, and it's about bloody time the non-left learns to apply this. Eyes on the goal, not the distraction. The complaints over the Wonder Woman screening are a very good hook, if you like, a way to get your foot in the door, but the issue is freedom of association. Example number 2. This one I discussed at length at the time when it happened back in 2015. Two men's rights activists paid a fee for a Women in Tech event advertised as only for women, and then showed up with their membership cards paid and were denied entry at the conference. With that denial of entry, they went straight to court, and the lawsuit was expensive enough to put out of business the entire feminist agitprop organization that had organized the conference. The founder of that organization had to do what normal people do when they fail in business, which is to get a normal job. The feminists cried and continue to cry because these guys haven't stopped, but no matter how much they cry, nobody cares. The founder of that organization has been given ample time in the press to cry that it was her life. I absolutely enjoyed drinking those feminists' tears, and I'm still glad to know there's someone out there making sure using the leftist rules to shut down leftist organizations. If you're a leftist watching this and don't like this tactic, please do hear me on. There are better trade-offs to this, and we'll explain in a few moments, but let me give you one more example. So, example number 3. Bakers refuse to make Trump cake for 9-year-old boy. Now, John Nolte, or the Noltinator of the Daily Wire, reports it in an impeccable manner. It's almost as if I wrote the article. He basically argues like I do. The issue is not the issue, so after briefly reporting the case, he goes straight into the core of the matter. Quote, "Throughout the country, a number of states are forcing Christian bakers and florists to participate in same-sex weddings, basically forcing them to choose between paid enslavement at the hands of the state, enslavement that they fear could damn their eternal soul, or crippling fines or the loss of their business. The idea that in the United States of America that we would force anyone, be it anti-Trump business owners or Christian business owners, to violate their personal conscience to engage in work they choose not to for whatever reason is un-American. Should we force Islamic cafes to serve pork chops, black caterers to supply food at a Ku Klux Klan rally, Jewish delis to offer cheeseburgers, gay painters to supply flyers at for a rally organized around the idea of a constitutional amendment against gay marriage, left-wing op-ed writers to serve a conservative audience opposed to Obamacare? Of course not. Putting out a sign that says open for business does not strip you of your human rights. The kid's mother should publicly name and sue each and every one of those bakers who turned down her business. The only way this fascist madness ends is if we force the left to feel the pain of their own rules. Name them, shame them, sue their pants off. We must sue for peace, and this is the only way. Now, technically, the Noltinator is wrong that this is the only way. However, he's practically correct because this is the only way likely to work. The fact of the matter is that we need to compel, to force if you want, we need to force the left to relearn the value of absolute freedom of association. Now, there is a peaceful way, which I would very much prefer, in which we simply negotiate. Look, we want freedom not to associate with people who hate our beliefs. We want the right to refuse to serve gay weddings, to refuse to serve lesbians, because really, who really likes lesbians? Not even lesbians like lesbians, or whatever. You guys on the left want the freedom to exclude white people, men and Christians from some or all of your private events or businesses. How about we make them all legal, and then we'll argue about others as well later on. But this would be a highly reasonable compromise. But this is predicated upon the notion that the left is not insane and not immune to practical politics and really basic reason. However, since it's not the case, and the left is indeed insane and on a my way or the highway power trip, the only other way is to compel them to start thinking about this. And at least in some jurisdictions, making them go bankrupt under their own book of rules is a good step forward. It's just that I'm not convinced it's the only step that's needed. If suing them into oblivion had been enough, you wouldn't be having leftists complaining that it is unfair that they can't have their women-only events because underrepresentation, or some similar nonsense. It is clear that them going bankrupt because of their sexism is not good enough to cement a lesson that maybe, just maybe, a broader freedom of association framework that protects both her and her opponents would be a step in the right direction. So if suing is not enough, there will have to be something else on top of it. And my suggestion is haunting. The way the leftist press haunts people for things they said or did a gazillion years ago. So when the feminist who had her agitprop organization shut down by the courts for sexism wants to do something, anything, we should send one or two thousands of letters to her collaborators or employers reminding them that she is a racist, sexist, homophobic bigot, as recognized in the court for refusing to service to two white men, one of them gay. And this should be done relentlessly to as many of them as possible. I've been thinking a lot about this. I've been thinking about setting up a website like loonyleftist.com or something like that, and the website to contain the names, place of employment, picture, and all public appearances and quotes of every single leftist anywhere in the world. Now, of course, that's not possible, but it would be possible to at least include these ones, the smaller ones. Again, go after people, not institutions. And then the website to track their employment and help the oppressed Kyrgyzstani refugees to call to their office and remind their employers how bigoted their employee is. Basically, we need our own SPLC hate list. There. I said it. And I also meant it. There will have to come a time when we will have to slowly erect our institutions. Ben Shapiro, for instance, made Truth Revolt to mirror the tactics of Media Matters. And it worked. It got a few big names off the screen and compelled several leftists to behave. But that's just the beginning. We need an organization with the gravitas and clout of the SPLC and one or more portals that name and shame leftists. Again, as I explained in the video about the academia, the purpose of all of this is to get to the level of mutually assured destruction. Approaching the left with a Cold War mentality is what we need, because the left is the evil empire and it is the Soviet Union. Just look at their tactics. None of it is foreign to the USSR. And just like their grandparents, the Soviets, they won't listen to reason and won't negotiate unless and until they know that their proverbial asses can and indeed will be kicked decisively. Once we have our own rhetorical nukes, then we can talk. And one can, of course, wax lyrical about what a sad state of affairs we're in that we have to acquire rhetorical nukes just to have an otherwise normal trade-off negotiation. That is, of course, you're right, but it is also irrelevant. I mean, sure, it would be nice if the left hadn't been a loony asylum, as we could at least in principle agree on basic stuff like freedom of expression, freedom of association, basic defense of our civilization and stuff like that. It used to be mainstream social democratic policy to uphold free speech and freedom of association, but those times are long gone. So let's not be stuck in the past and look to the promising future. It's not going to be easy, and part of the reason it's not going to be easy is because older conservatives have done nothing to stop any of this. In fact, many of them applauded right alongside the far left as our individual natural right to associate with whomever we damn please were trampled upon more and more by the state. So we start at a disadvantage, but we have the momentum, so all that there's needed is the will. So yeah, that's basically how I think we can work to recoup at least some of the lost freedom of association, by attacking the leftist de facto double standards and by personally undermining leftist individuals, some of whom will start advocating within the left that maybe some freedom of association is not such a bad idea after all, and that maybe leftists need some of that too. It sounds extreme when I describe the tactics, but the goal is really moderate. All I want is to be able to open a male-only business, a male-only club, and so on and so forth. I'm not particularly interested in the racial angle, but obviously others are. And why should the state forbid that to them? Also, keep in mind that this video is also for Europe and other places, so please spare me with the civil rights diatribe. I don't care about your civil rights. I would have cared if there hadn't been a gazillion black organizations requiring race-segregated spaces on taxpayers' dime, or at least if there had been an equal or higher number of black organizations condemning that nonsense. Since no such thing exists, it is thus reasonable to assume that at least some people, both black and white, actually do want some degree of racial segregation. And if that is the case, then it is obvious that civil rights isn't appropriately serving all people. And with all of that being said, now you tell me, are you a freedom of association fundamentalist like me? And if not, why not? I always find it fascinating that the arguments against freedom of association in private matters rely a lot on what-ifs rather than what actually happened and can be verified and measured historically. For instance, I've had it thrown at me that, oh, we had that and then Jim Crow happened, when in reality Jim Crow was exactly the opposite of freedom of association. It was the state imposing who you are allowed to associate with. No choice for anyone. Forced segregation is just as bad for freedom of association as forced integration is. Both are totalitarian garbage, and incidentally, they both come from the same political party. Also, as always, please do write in the comments if you have other ideas on how to forward the concept of freedom of association. If you know specifics, I'll be delighted to read and hear more about those. And with all of that being said, thank you all for watching. Thank you for your continuous and generous support. Follow me on the usual social media, links in the low bar. And may I remind you that the Georgia-Armenia tour starts pretty soon, so please throw a shekel if you can for that endeavor. And if you see this video after that, throw a shekel anyway, because there are many other expenses on surprises being worked behind the scenes as we speak. And with that said, I'll see you all soon on Freedom Alternative.